And we're live on another episode of Football Palestine Extra, the podcast for our premium subscribers over on footballpalestine.com. If you're watching this video over on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts and want to hear the podcast in its entirety, consider taking out a paid subscription to Football Palestine. It really helps us get the word out there about the Palestine national team and all things related to Palestinian football. On this week's episode, we've got quite a lot to discuss. We have friendly dates for March 2026, some transfer news that we're going to tease a little bit of information behind the paywall. So stay tuned for that one. And we're also going to talk about the political element of the game. What is FIFA doing? Is Gianni Infantino coming next month? Will Palestine get to host games? What does that mean for Israel's suspension? But first things first, let's talk about what is top of mind for everyone over the past 48 hours since the news leaked. Palestine back in action. The last time we saw the national team play was back in the Arab Cup, December 11th, 2025, in that quarterfinal against Saudi Arabia that went all the way to extra time, where Palestine eventually lost in controversial fashion to the Saudis. Well, we are going to see the national team in action again, this time in Morocco, against the national teams of Mauritania and Benin. I believe the first game is against Benin on the 27th, and the second one on the 31st is against Mauritania, or it might be the other way around. In either case, check out the article. We have the dates listed there over on our website. Look, I think these are good friendlies. These are not big name national teams by any stretch of the imagination, but they're good friendlies for one reason, and that is if you want to prepare for a cycle, and that's what we're going into. It's a new cycle. It's the 2030-31 cycle, the 2030 being the World Cup, 2031 being the Asian Cup, which is always played 6 or 7 months after the World Cup finals. You need to kind of do your testing now. And the best way to test yourself is really to kind of go up against different kinds of football. And if we've learned anything, it's that Palestine's kind of stuck playing the same teams over and over and over again. That's what we saw this past cycle. And it's very hard to find, I think, teams in Asia that can give you a test, right, that aren't in West Asia. So, you've got like the big dogs of the continent, your Japans, Koreas, Australia, Iran. Outside of that, you've got maybe some of the Central Asian countries headed by Uzbekistan. I think Tajikistan is also up there. They're quite decent. Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan. These are the types of countries that might be able to give you a test and expose you to a different type of football. But outside of that, it's really, really slim pickings, right? The Southeast Asian Football Federation now has some teams as well, but some teams are on the up, some teams are on the down. We played Malaysia, obviously we lost to them. So obviously football is progressing there, but it's also tremendously chaotic. We saw what happened in the aftermath of that Malaysia game, where actually it came out to be that half that team was naturalized and was not actually eligible to play for the Malaysian national team. So what Palestine needs to do is actually play against teams that aren't in West Asia. Meaning not Arab teams. Why do I say that? Because I don't know how much you learn when you play against an Arab team, because the game just sort of devolves into a really, really hard, bitterly fought battle. And if we kind of look back at the cycle, last 2 years, and I wrote about this as well in that article that you can check out on footballpalestine.com, Palestine played against the UAE. They played against Qatar at the Asian Cup. They came back to World Cup qualifying. They played against Lebanon. They advanced to the third round of World Cup qualifying, and they played against Jordan twice. They played against Iraq twice. They played against Oman twice. They played against Kuwait twice. And then at the Arab Cup, they played against Syria. They played against Qatar again. They played against Saudi Arabia. So if you're keeping count, I think that's over a dozen games, and they played basically everybody in the West Asian Football Federation, save for Yemen and Bahrain. And yeah, Bahrain they faced in a March 2023 friendly, excuse me, so it hasn't been that long since they last faced them. And Yemen they faced plenty in the last cycle, the last couple of cycles. So for those of you who have kept track of Palestinian football for a while, you'll know that the last time there was a WAF championship, Palestine played Yemen. They then played them twice in World Cup qualifying for the 2022 edition, and then they played them again for Asian Cup 2023 qualifying. So even the teams that we haven't played so recently, Bahrain, Yemen, it's not like we haven't played them in ages. We have played them in the last, what would it be, 4 years or so. So Palestine needs to get out of the region. I think it's a coup that they got an invite to this African football friendly exhibition tournament that's, I think, being used by Morocco to showcase their facilities and the kind of show of soft power. But I think it's great. We've never played Benin before, and Benin is a team that's on the rise. I thought they had a really good World Cup qualifying campaign. They really pushed, I believe it was South Africa and Nigeria in their group. They really pushed both teams to the limit. And at the AFCON, they made it out of their groups, and this isn't the first time they make it out of their group either. Seems to be a tough, well-organized side. A little goal shy, but I don't mind that. I just want the team to kind of go and get exposed against teams of different footballing styles. Mauritania, we played ages ago, back in 2010, I believe. That game ended in a scoreless draw. Obviously, a lot has changed for Mauritania, and a lot has changed for Palestine as well in that time span. But I think both friendlies are good opportunities for the national team. And I think more than anything, it shows that there is a plan in place, right? Because it's not going to be that long before the real matches roll around. We're talking about less than a year to go before the Asian Cup. We'll know our opponents on April 11th for that. And then we don't know what's going to happen with this Nations League business. Like, if there's going to be a Nations League, it's probably going to fill up some more windows, which means we're going to end up in the same cycle of A, playing competitive matches, but B, also playing against opponents that we play against on a regular basis. And I think if you want to build a team, you really need to kind of test it in all ways that you can. So the fact that they were in Spain and played against Basque Country and played against Catalonia was, I think, a huge boost to the team's development. And I think these two matches will also help kind of round out the squad, because we do know that the core of the team is there, and the core of the team has played with each other against the opposition that we're going to face at the Asian Cup, and then after that in the new cycle trying to qualify for the 2030 World Cup. Rami Hamad is going to be your goalkeeper. Milad Termanin is going to be one of the two defenders. Hamid Hamdan. Obviously the attackers, Aded Dabbar, Zaid Qunbar, Wissam Abu Ali. All these players have played with each other in that type of environment against Asian nations, particularly West Asian nations. And let's face it, unless the draw is going to be massively different this time around, unless teams from other parts of the continent are going to improve, we're probably going to be facing a lot of West Asian nations at the Asian Cup. And then a couple months later, when the World Cup qualifying process starts again, we're going to be facing a lot of them as well. So I like the fact that we're playing both these friendlies. I like the fact that we're playing in Morocco as well, because that's a nice little preview of where the next World Cup will be hosted after this one in North America is over. It will be hosted in Morocco, Spain, and Portugal. And these are little details that, if the plan works out and Palestine qualifies for the World Cup, they'll have intimate knowledge of what's it like to play a game in Spain, what's it like to play a game in Morocco as well. So yeah, that's all we've got for this first part of our podcast. Let's transition a little bit and speak about transfers and how Palestinian players are performing abroad. So I think the biggest transfer news of the week, Omar Faraj He's going to sign for Halmstad. Actually, he already has signed for Halmstad. And I think it's really indicative of how far Palestinian football has come, that you've got former Sweden international signing for a club in the Allsvenskan. That's the top tier in Sweden. And it's not really big news, it's not a big deal because Omar Faraj is a good player, but he's on the outside looking in because if he wants to get into the side, he's got to elbow his way past the likes of Adey Dabbar and Wissam Abu Ali and Asad Al-Hamlawi and Zayed Qanbar. And now there's probably some other guys as well that are trying to get in on the action. Khalid Nabris was part of the Arab Cup squad. Mohamed Belah is on the fringes as well. Mahmoud Wadi might be there as well. So, Omar Faraj is not like a lock to get into this side, which just goes to show you the immense amount of attacking talent in the national team at this present moment. Now, I think this is a good signing for him. He's obviously going to a club where he's going to be wanted. You might recall that around this time last year, the first match of the Allsvenskan season, which I think is kind of like right after the international break, he scored 5 goals in a single game. The opponent in that game was Halmstad. So Halmstad obviously remembered that, saw that he was available on a free transfer after terminating his contract with Zamalek, and said, come on over, we want you, we need you. After all, we've only scored some ridiculously small amount of goals in 30 games. I think they might have scored something like 21 goals in 30 games, just a paltry amount. And it's incredible that they survived. They actually weren't, they were towards the bottom of the table, but they weren't in the relegation scrap until the final day of the season. They actually found a way to get results in spite of the fact that they weren't scoring goals, and in spite of the fact that even teams that were relegated had scored more goals than them. So I think anytime you've got a guy who can score goals, you match him up with a team that needs goals, that tends to be a winning combination. So there's a fit there. Happy for Omar Faraj. I think he needs this type of move. He's going back to, I think, the comfort of a league he's familiar with, a league that he probably knows, I'm good here, but I could even probably play at a higher level. But I think he needs to find his confidence, and going back to Sweden should help him do exactly that. So with that, the transfer window has more or less shut. Now, there are some markets that are still open, but we'll talk about what I think is almost certainly going to be a move we'll see happen after the paywall. So if you like what you see here, what you've heard here so far, consider upgrading your subscription to a paid subscription. That way you can get the inside scoop of this transfer that I think is going to be announced in the next couple of days. With that, let's get on to the third section of the podcast, and that is, we have to talk about it, the political nature of football and what exactly is going on with Infantino, what is exactly going on with this ban that people keep bringing up about Israel getting banned and it just never seems to come to pass. Will it come to pass in 2026, or is it just going to get kicked down the road again? And I think it's very interesting because if you look at what was supposed to happen next month, what was supposed to happen, and what the FA came out and said almost immediately after the Arab Cup was over, was there was supposed to be a home game that Palestine was going to play against another Arab nation, and Infantino was going to be in attendance. Now, Infantino is still going to visit Palestine. That is happening. But the fact that the match isn't happening, I think, is a huge blessing in disguise. Why do I say that? Look, I would love for Palestine to come back and play at home again. I think it's going to be super important for us, if we want to get to a World Cup, to have some semblance of a home field advantage. We won't have that. Now, I still think we can do it, in spite of not playing home matches, but I think the boost we would get from playing at home would be incredible. Now, that said, you always have to ask, who would this benefit? And I always found it very, very difficult to believe that the beneficiary here would be the Palestinian national team. Why do I say that? Well, usually before you kind of skip to hosting an internationally sanctioned football match, you have to host a league on a regular basis. And there has been no league football in Palestine since October 2023. It's not going to come back to Gaza